Hey guys, special episode of Burning Platform. This time with Paul Coester from Down Under. I've met Paul a couple of times, have talked to him God knows how many times, at just the most God-forsaken hours for either one of us. I'm sure it's not a very convenient time for him, but he's kindly made the time. Paul, thank you for joining us. He is a star in the SAP world. I'll let him describe what he does, and then we'll jump into some questions about SAP and how the year 2020 has been for you. Paul, thank you again.
Always a pleasure to chat with you, Vinnie. So early morning here down under for me. I watched the sunrise come up over the water this morning. Fantastic view, and I have my dose of caffeine, as you can see. So I'm well underway.
I was hoping you said it was a gin and tonic.
I think that's more your time than mine. So I've been around SAP for over 20 years. I'm certified on 6 ERP platforms, but I specialize predominantly in the SAP space, primarily because the majority of customers operate their technologies. So I've done more than 20 ECC implementations, and as of last month, 12 SAP S4 HANA implementations, all the way from life cycle, from vendor selection, scope, RFP tender, all the way through to go live in various guises in Asia Pacific as well as Europe for a few clients. I've been awarded world number one by a couple of my peers in New York as a chief architect. Some of my awards, some of my designs have won awards, but these are all, thanks to great collaboration and in partnership with amazingly talented people. They make things look easy. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I do advisory services and quality assurance for clients in the SAP realm.
And Paul, you're being modest, but this is under your Big Blue Ventures firm, right? That's the firm.
Correct. Yes.
So Paul, one of the things, I was in Bangkok last year at an SAP event, and it was really impressive how much presence they have across Asia, right? And it goes back to ECC days. But on the other hand, when you compare them to the Oracles and the Infors and the Workdays and so on, they're hardly present in Asia. And it doesn't just help SAP. Obviously, third-party maintenance vendors like Vinnie can show off a lot of Korean and Japanese clients and so on. So SAP has a very big footprint in Asia Pacific. What are you seeing? What have you seen around them in the last year? Is the momentum continuing? Give us some perspective on SAP from an Asia Pacific perspective.
Certainly a major uptick in SAP activity. Initially, the perception was primarily driven by all the leadership changes, as you well know. Christian on a huge charm offensive, and it seems to be paying some dividends. Some of the cultural changes I've seen come through in the medium to lower ranks coming down. I've watched sales pitches change tack and pivot and become more client-centric rather than trying to flog packages. So quite a big change in that respect. And then there's been a big focus around interoperability and integration, which it's still early days. You've heard SAP speak about it on a number of occasions. And I believe there's still got quite a long way to go. Being in the trenches constantly with clients, I know what challenges they face. But it's very, very encouraging to see that the message from Christian is starting to embed itself into the rest of the organization. As you know, HMS SAP doesn't change direction very quickly. But being the behemoth that it is, I have to say it's exhibiting some, I wouldn't say startup, but some pretty agile behavior that I wouldn't have expected of it, say, 2 to 5 years ago. So the presence in the APAC market is changing. And interesting, you mentioned some of the other providers, Rimini, Spinnaker, and so forth. There's been quite a bit of heave and shove in that space, and I'll elaborate that on a little bit later. But there's been some interesting wins scored on both scoreboards and both sides of the fence in terms of winning back clients and switching allegiances.
Sure. You've done so many S4 implementations. I know firms that totally have done less than you have. But early in the year, you got the feeling that S4 projects were considered too big, too long, took too long to implement. And so we sort of saw a little bit of a slowdown, at least in the US. What have you seen in Asia Pacific?
Pretty much the same thing. I'm pretty blunt with my clients, and I tell them, if you're looking for a classic ROI, you're wasting your time. Don't look for an ROI. SAP is a strategic investment. It's part of the tooling of the enterprise. You can look at improvements and efficiencies, but not in the classic sense. The way you measured things in the 90s and the noughties is no longer applicable largely, because this is SAP will tell you it's a revolutionary change. It's more evolutionary than revolutionary in a number of instances, particularly in the core processes. So finance, HR, etc. Those are pretty static. So I've seen a lot of clients pushing back, saying, I'd rather sweat my ECC investments or my current SAP technology stack investments, and I will invest in other areas, particularly now with COVID, into other areas of greater concern. But I am starting to also see the switch back now. People are going, all right, it's 2021. Christian's announced the sort of the 2-year stay of execution. I am also advising clients that they need to start the planning process. Even if you don't pull the trigger, at least have your plan packaged and squared away. So, yes, a big pushback to hold, but I'm starting to see that trend come back now. And in particular, 2 massive S4 implementations about to kick off in APAC in the next 6 weeks.
Great. Well, what we did see, I interviewed Greg Tom, who is one of their key executives, and he said that we are doing a lot of what he called the Amplify initiative. So Ariba projects and Qualtrics projects, smaller bite-sized projects, right? So he said that was pretty hot. And he said, amazingly, systems integrators were bidding $50,000 and $100,000 jobs. I never thought a Deloitte or an Accenture would stoop so low, but I guess that's what the market has forced them to do. And then on the other side, we saw a lot of vertical players emerge in the last few months: telemedicine, e-commerce, distance learning, and so on. And so I talked to Peter Meyer, who has the industries, and their SAP still seems to be pushing the more traditional, big systems, utility billing, stuff like that. What are you seeing in both areas, the cloud surround products and the verticals, when it comes to Asia Pacific?
It's interesting. I know Peter Meyer. He's been an exec sponsor on a few of my clients, or the SAP exec sponsor on a few of my client sites. So a great character. Got a lot of respect for him. So in terms of the verticals, I'm seeing, look, the utilities are pushing pretty hard and strong, and they're definitely changing and pivoting. The same in retail and gov, and interestingly, defense. Not unsurprising, given some, the geopolitical landscape has undergone a few tectonic shifts, I would imagine, at the macro level. Banking seems to have cooled a fair bit, and that the tooling is more around client centricity, and I think SAP lag a little bit in that space to a fair degree. In terms of the packaging and the cloud stuff, I tend to echo Tom's sentiments around things like Ariba and SuccessFactors. Definitely concur those product sets and those niche areas are getting a lot of focus. I'm also seeing, agree with you, the big vendors are playing for small scraps, quite surprisingly, and going up against the boutiques. And I've got some interesting intel for you on the boutiques and that snippet for you, and some solid market combat exchange intel for you on that. but yes, very much the same kind of sentiment around this area, and also in Europe as well.
Well, you mentioned boutiques and systems integrators. In your role as a program manager, you oversee a lot of SIs, right? Have you seen their behavior change in the last year? Because one of the risks was they were trying to go after S4, kind of like they did the ECC world. But the pandemic forced them to stop and revisit, right? And say, we got to work from home, we can't travel. So it's been a forced change, but is their behavior changing enough? What are you seeing?
I actually want to take a step back and perhaps just shed some light on some client behavior that's changed considerably in the last, say, 18 months. I've shaped our conversation around the last 18 months. I think it's the most relevant. Clients have become massively more self-aware. They are pushing on SIs and challenging. It's so encouraging for me to see where they will actually say, tell me about your Activate methodology. Oh, really? Your exit and entry criteria, what are they? What are the definitions and the metrics? And I sit in the sessions and it's, it's like praise singing noises for me, because it's encouraging to see clients go, I'll trust this big four, they've got my interests at heart. Well, there's already commercial tension between them and you to start off with. And if you understand that fundamental difference, you can work with it and manage it. But to watch clients go, well, tell me about your solution manager strategy, because we understand from somebody like me that solution manager is not a tool, it's a capability, it's a strategic capability. So I'm seeing vendors, SIs come under a fair bit of pressure from clients to actually deliver more value. And in particular, I see the traditional SIs will come in with the, very cool slide packs and 500 slides, and you'll go through their credentials and the 19 million customers they've done and everyone's happy. But then you get the little boutique shops. They come in and they just blow them away. And what I've noticed on two clients that I've done in the last 9 months, on the first client, 4 boutique vendors that I put in place to provide the service. 2 of them got gobbled by an SI. On the second site, there are 5 vendors. 3 of the boutiques got gobbled by the big ones. So I'm seeing a lot of big SIs reaching further down into the food chain and actually assimilating boutiques to win the customers, actually grab that customer base or that solution. And particularly in the S4 space, having to pivot and actually demonstrate true value. But to your second question around, are they doing more of the same in ECC? I have to sadly say, for the majority of them, no change. They just don't seem to have learned the lessons from the 90s and the noughties.
I thought you were going down the positive path, but now you're coming to the reality.
I'm sad to say, priced out of the market, absolutely, completely insane timelines. I mean, they have some vendors, 4 years to implement FICO. You can't have that anymore, Vinnie. It's untenable for clients. And particularly with COVID has put a whole new spin on things. Entire enterprises have had to pivot on their heels because of it. And a lot of the vendors have been caught napping.
Well, the good thing I heard you say was clients have become more self-aware. That in the end, you can blame anybody else, but you're paying the bills. And if you don't monitor that, not much you and I can do, right? So that's
Mea culpa. 100% agree. And quite often I sit in exec sessions or in front of the board, and I'll get a direct question from the CFO or the CEO or one of the directors saying, so whose fault is this? And I have to look them in the eye and I go, it's yours. This happened on your watch. And they go, oh, we're not, SI experts. I said, no, but your governance and your PMO structures weren't in place.
Paul, you're so good that they will listen to you. Others will get fired for telling them that.
Sometimes it's not pleasant to deliver that news.
Paul, you are a breed of what I call a new fractional IT. You are constantly working with multiple clients. You're all over the world, it seems like. right?
I am, and constant, yeah, generally multiple clients, yes.
So tell us how that is working out, because it must be, it must be great for clients because they don't have to pay for you full time. You drive them nuts, but but it must be tough on you. I mean, what if you have 12 different clients having an emergency on the same day? Tell us how your model works.
So I will throttle my clients in terms of bandwidth and consumption. I also have certain structures in place to discourage, how shall I say, excessive use for minor challenges, and it's generally in the way of fees. No, I'm just kidding. I self-manage and self-regulate, so I pretty much know when I've had the preliminary engagements with the clients what I'm up against, and I'm quite open to have the conversation to go. You've engaged me for X service. Adding Y and Z is going to put me under too much pressure, and quality or attention to detail may suffer. And because 99% of the things I'm called in to do are strategic, we have that open and honest conversation, and the clients appreciate it. The pressure points come in, obviously, as you can imagine. The C-suite are very demanding, and quite rightly so. And yes, I charge a lot of money for my services, but the outcomes are pretty much life and death for a lot of these clients. And I've done an emergency lift and shift a few months ago for multi-billion.
You were telling me about your computer and how much you spent on it. Tell the world about some of why you need something that expensive and so elaborate.
So quite often when I'm called in, the clients will give a brief, and the brief will be, we want to do this with SAP or that with SAP. And then I need to understand the entire ecosystem. So I need to see everything in motion. So the best way I picture it or explain it to people is I'm almost soaring above the client, and I need to see all the parts in motion, regardless of whether they sit at the extreme fringe of the client's enterprise or the beating heart. All of the patients is important, right? All of the client is of crucial importance, and it depends on who you talk to. The person on the fringe out in the warehouse, they're printing and they're scanning stuff as their world. You talk to the CFO and they want to know management, accounting, and the crucial financial indicators and the pulse rate of the business. All of these vectors come together and they have different importance. But if I cannot see everything that is going on, I cannot pull the right levers, I cannot make the right decisions, and I cannot guide and influence or lobby the stakeholders in the correct way for them to make the right or the best, the decisions in the best interest of the business. So what that translates to to your point around the technology investment is I run a pretty massive shop here. This looks like a little data center in here, so that I can see everything that's going on, because some of my clients have thousands of systems, and that doesn't sound important, but because you come in with an SAP spin 9 times out of 10. But if they're running 7 or 8 warehouse or logistics systems, and that's moving 85% of their product across the value chain, you better know what's going on in there, and you better understand that if I pull this lever, those 2 lights will come on a Tuesday afternoon. You better understand the import of that and what that means to the bottom line, because if you don't, and you're merely looking at this with a technology lens, you're going to fail to deliver the right outcome. And that's absolutely crucial. Don't break the business, and understand what they're doing. The technology after that becomes, I would say, I'll be cocky and say, almost irrelevant. You have to understand the business.
Yep. Paul, this is fascinating. What are the thoughts about SAP? Are you optimistic about Christian and the team? What could they be doing better?
Very optimistic about Christian and the team. What could they do better? They're still in areas trying to sell packages. So when clients are engaging with them around S4, the success factors and Concur stuff come along. Now, yes, that's understandable. But in a number of instances, when the account execs and the salespeople engage with the client, it's not with the view to firstly understand the business and then tailor the solution offering accordingly. It's and particularly when you get the pricing, which still does my head in, it's this amorphous bottom line mess. And the clients, again, talking about self-aware, they get pretty animated about it. They want to see the line item pricing. And SAP go, no, but it's all bundled as a package. So you just get, it's $10 million for this stuff. And they go, well, what if I take 25% off here? And they want the ability to pull levers, right? So SAP's maturity in responding to that, to the client, and I don't think it's unreasonable, lags by a fair margin. And also, the shroud of secrecy around the licensing and the costs. Everything is going to the cloud and everything is subscription based. It's sooner or later you're going to have to hang your laundry list out, right? And people are going to take their cyber shopping basket and they're going to skip through the field and they're going to go out and have 2 apples and 3 of these. Your prices have to be out there for everybody to see. So that's a big change that SAP could do. The other big change that SAP could look at is integration.
Oh yeah. Well, it's been an issue for years, right? I mean, the 7 Sisters, the Ariba, Success Factors, I mean, they're still working on that, right?
Yes, and not everything runs on HANA.
Exactly, yeah.
The dark little secret, but look, they're heading in the right direction. A lot of positive vibes out of it, and I like the management vibe that's coming down from the top with the customer centricity, but like with everything that size, it takes a bit of a shift, and there is some historic culture that still needs to be changed.
Well, one question, Paul, that is coming up more and more is, obviously the hyperscalers are gaining momentum all over the world, right? And they have their own platforms. So where will SAP Cloud Platform, I mean, they're investing a lot in Cloud Platform, Analytics Cloud, and so on. Is that going to be headbutting with Amazon tools and Google tools and Azure tools? Where do you see clients making those choices? Or is it one of each for now?
I would liken them to 2 prize fighters eyeing each other from the corner of a ring. And your hand is on that bell and you're about to strike it. And let me tell you why. A really good example is SAP BW. Every customer just about runs it. Yep. Every customer hates it, right? It's a dog. It's expensive. Any changes require considerable investment, and the outcome is generally mediocre at best. That's it. I'm brutal. BW is dead. Please get rid of it. There's a really good example and a segue into this. So if you look at the hyperscalers and what they're offering, Microsoft and SAP have announced the one data model, and it's fantastic. When you look at what's on offer, at some point, someone's going to have to give. And I would say SAP is too late to the party. So they got the SAP in the cockpit and SAC. But I've deployed a couple of SAC instances now, and there's pretty much very little in the box from a capability point of view. Clients still have to fall back onto BW, which is a crying shame. Here's the killer. In the last 6 months, 5 clients have gone onto a pure MS stack and hooked directly into SAP, and they are happy as can be. That's just Azure, not even AWS or GCP. So I'm just talking Azure. They're happy. They're happy. They're happy to build some of the extractor stuff themselves, the framework stuff, and the performance and the visibility and the insights they're getting into the data has been a revelation to them, and the speed at which they can get it at compared to, say, historic BW. So I'm seeing a major shift, and I actually think, let me be blunt, I actually think the hyperscalers will win the war. Well, SAP at some point are going to have to capitulate and just open it all up.
I talked to Holger Mueller a couple of weeks ago, and he had basically the same perspective. He was like, application vendors would be much better off focusing on applications.
Yeah. Yes.
Business process, business process. Yeah.
And interoperability, common data model and integration, they would get hugely much greater traction with their clients and a far higher adoption rate than trying to compete with the hyperscalers. Have left them. Look, they're too late to the party, right? They got there and everyone was cleaning up. It's too late.
Paul, always a pleasure to talk to you. Any final thoughts?
I look forward to 2021. I actually do miss a bit of flying, Vinnie. I'm probably not as a regular flyer as you, but I do considerable mileage.
I had a call with a CEO of a London-based fintech company yesterday, and he's been doing two things. Blew my mind. He's been flying transatlantic to Boston and New York several times, and get this, he takes the London Underground to work on some days.
What?
He's, and he is 70. He is very, very smart. He's very cautious. But I was like, you're a hero, man, for flying and taking even more so for taking the Underground. So
yeah, that's hardcore.
Well, look, we can't hide forever. So like you, I'm looking forward to flying. But I tell others, you go ahead first. I'll be behind you.
I'll be right behind you.
Way behind you. Paul, Happy New Year. Thank you so much. And stay safe, and look forward to having a cup of coffee somewhere in the world with you.
Always a pleasure and an honor to have a chat to you. And I hope at some point finally to publish my S4 book. And we'll see how we go.